Think we're live. Shall I start? Okay, hello everybody, good afternoon. I hope you've been enjoying Rural Fest so far today. My name's Katie and I'm one of the journalists this year at Rural Fest. Today I'm joined by Les Goldman, Luna Beck and Nikki Bray for our live panel. So hi, how are you all today?
Good, thanks.
Yeah, we're all trying not to speak at the same time and are managing none of us to speak at all. So that's starting.
There's going to be some awkward gaps. But I could say for myself, I'm doing very well today. Thank you.
Okay, good. So first, I would like to give the audience a bit of an introduction as to who you all are and what you do. So Les, would you like to start?
Oh, hi everybody. My name's Les. I'm here probably for two reasons. I'm the chair of something called the Two Rivers Bands, and we run two community bands in the Ilkley area, a large concert band with around 50 members and a smaller swing band with around 25 members. The other reason I'm here is that I've been involved in helping to organise a rota of local volunteer musicians to serenade care home residents in the area who have been terribly isolated during lockdown. And we've been serenading care home residents. We've been outside. Sometimes they've been inside. Sometimes they've been outside at a socially acceptable distance. And that's been a very interesting and successful scheme.
Cool. Luna, how about you?
Yeah, so I'm Luna Beck. I'm a singer-songwriter, and I am originally from Leeds, so I was born and brought up in Yorkshire, and now living in London, so not very rural, but I've been making music all my life, and I suppose that's why I'm here. Very passionate about supporting anybody, young and old, to make music for themselves, especially composition, songwriting, self-expression. So that's me.
Great. Nikki, how about you?
So I'm a bass player turned singer-songwriter, and I go by the name of Nikki Bray's Musical Menagerie. So my songs range from the light-hearted to the frankly fairly ridiculous. And work-wise, I recently left a long-term job and started out as a freelance community music worker, working on a couple of projects, which hopefully I'll talk a bit about later. And in my spare time, I organise music events which aim to kind of bring people together to share the joy of music, and also to kind of give people the confidence and a kind of a safe and welcoming space to kind of perform them in.
Great. So first up, I'd like to ask you all, what would you be doing if we weren't in lockdown currently? So I'll start with Les again.
Well, today's Father's Day, so it would have been, I think if it was today and it really wasn't lockdown, I think I'd be seeing my kids and my grandkids. However, in real life, we should have been playing, our swing band should have been playing on Ilkley Bandstand for the Ilkley Great Get Together, which is a large street party that happens in Ilkley for the Great Get Together movement in memory of the MP Joe Cox, who was sadly murdered. And that's an event to bring communities together. So we should have been bringing communities together in real life instead of on the internet.
Yeah, that's a really big thing. Have you organised anything with them for today?
There is a great get together happening, which is, I think it's the Great Get Together team in Ilkley, who's they're terribly dynamic, have sent out a playlist of tunes, and they're hoping that there will be lots of people dancing at an appropriate distance from each other in the streets of Ilkley to the tunes on the Great Get Together playlist. So yeah, something is happening, but it's not quite what was anticipated.
Yeah, I find a lot of people are currently facing that situation. Luna, how about you?
Yeah, I have to say, first of all, I love Ilkley and I love hearing you talking about it. It's very, because I don't get back to Yorkshire that much and certainly haven't through lockdown, but big fan of walking on Ilkley Moor. So actually, I would have been, for the very first time, making a trip to Georgia in the Caucasus. I've been singing and exploring Georgian folk song for the last about 7 or 8 years, and it's been quite an influence on my songwriting, but also just something that I've really enjoyed, a wonderful form of community music. And I was set to go there for the first time with my voice teacher Frank Kane and a few others, and we were going to have some song learning from Georgian singing teachers over there. And it's my birthday next week, so it was going to be quite an exciting trip. And I was going to try and get there overland because I'm quite into not flying. So that was I was sort of looking into planning that trip when the lockdown happened. So it's a bit disappointing that that was cancelled, but I'm sure I will go there at some point. And yeah,
Yeah, lots of trips being cancelled. Yeah, hopefully we'll find a way to get there without planes at this rate. Um, yeah, but yeah. So I'm sorry to hear that, but happy birthday for next week.
oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, Nikki, how about you?
So generally, before lockdown was happening, I was spending a lot of time in Holbeck. So I was going to Old Chapel Music Studios there 3 times a week as a sessional worker for the Bringing It All Back Home project, and that's a music and mental health project which uses music to try and improve the well-being of vulnerable adults. And then on Saturday mornings, I was back in Holbeck at the lovely Holbeck Working Men's Club, really fab venue. And we were running a new project called Musicultural Conversations, kind of interactive music, drama, and English language sessions for refugee, asylum seekers, and migrant communities. So lots of time in Holbeck and lots of time outside of Holbeck preparing kind of things for those projects. And, other than that, running kind of music events, going to lots of friends, music events, watching lots of local bands, doing lots of things outside of the house. That's what I would be doing at the moment.
Yeah, the complete opposite of what we're all up to now. Um, what are you all doing currently in lockdown? So could you all give me an overview as to what a week in the life is like for all of you? So we'll start with Les. I'm sorry, that didn't really give you much time to think. But yeah, so could you tell me in a week of this current lockdown, what do you do?
Um, well, I certainly haven't been bored. That's certainly the case. We're very lucky here. We've got quite a big garden and plenty of outdoor space because we don't live too far from the moor. So we've been able to get out of the house safely, walk the dog on the moor, do plenty of gardening. So that, in a personal sense, my wife and I have been okay. Obviously, it's been difficult keeping in contact. All our children and grandchildren are in London, so it's keeping in contact with them has, I think, like for many families, that's been. I mean, it's been fun in some ways, but Zoom doesn't quite replace giving your granddaughter or grandson a hug. However, when I was thinking about this question, um, the I've got some regular music things that I'm involved with. I have regular music lessons. I've recently started playing the banjo. I got given one for my birthday in December, and sort of in lockdown, I found that distance has become both something that's really important and also something that is totally unimportant. So I've ended up having banjo lessons with a guy in Massachusetts once a fortnight over Zoom, which I think pre lockdown I would never even have dreamt was no, it's actually over Skype. Sorry, he uses Skype, but I'd never have dreamt that was possible. So I have regular online banjo lessons in Massachusetts once a fortnight, and regular online tenor saxophone lessons in Leeds once a fortnight, and they're all done from this very room where I am sitting now. So it's quite remarkable. I've obviously being involved in the Ilkley Care Home Serenade thing. I might have one or two outdoor care home gigs to go to, either on my own with my backing tracks or with my wife on oboe. And we're doing quite a lot to try and keep our larger band together. I mean, the concert band has 50 members spread between Bradford and people from quite rural environments like Grassington and Thrushfield. So trying to keep band members in contact with each other and engaged with music making has been quite a challenge. And so I spend some of my week with others trying to organise that. So that'll probably do from me.
That's great. You have a really busy week. Luna, how about you?
Yeah, I suppose one of the things that's been interesting for me is that there's been different phases to the lockdown for me. I think initially, I obviously, because we didn't know how long it was going to last, I was concerned to make sure. Well, I had a flurry of activity, thinking, right, I'm going to make the most of this. I'm really productive. Going to, do all these things, and then that sort of slightly relaxed. Then I started. Well, I suppose the thing is that the thing that's been constant is that I have been spending as much time outside as possible, which obviously has been difficult, but because we've been able to go for walks, I've been going for bike rides, just trying to realizing what is important to me, getting outside, having green space, having time in nature, even just in my garden, which I'm very lucky to have. What keeps me sane? That's been the sort of focus of lockdown for me. Trying to buy healthy food simply, cook simply. Obviously, money's challenging now, which I guess we'll talk about later, but just taking care of the basics. And then the other thing is that I needed to make music, so I started doing live streams quite early on. I had to teach myself how to do it all, and get good sound, and then do the live stream gigs. So my weeks in the early months of lockdown were very much about fixing up gigs, promoting them, and practicing, and then writing as well, because I found that when all the distractions recede, there was a lot of space for creativity to arise. So I was writing new stuff, also getting to grips with the equipment that I had that hadn't really got under the skin of yet, started using Ableton Live, a loop station that I have, and so I got my inner geek on a bit with some of this tech stuff. So I've been sort of cozying up in this little cave of music equipment, and then putting it out there online. So that's been really nice. At the same time, a lot of stuff hasn't stopped in terms of online promotion. I had an EP come out in May, so I had to also keep going with the promotion. I've been working on videos. That's all stuff or editing videos I can do within lockdown, and finding kind of interesting ways to promote stuff. But then I think the last few weeks has taken a totally different turn. I've been quite involved in the anti-racism protests in London, and also because it feels like we're all together. I mean, maybe not everybody but in the world, but there's a lot of sense that the whole world is in the same moment, which feels really unusual. And that because we're all in this moment, it feels like you just have to go with that. So although I had a plan to release another song next, my feeling, I was very moved, and I've been involved in this kind of activism for a while. So I was just I have to write about this. I have to write about what's going on in the world. So the last week or two, I've basically just been trying to write about what's happening, and my next focus on that was recording some of the stuff that I've written. So yeah, it definitely feels like an evolving experience, from the beginning to now.
Definitely. So, Nikki, how about you?
Seems like it's been such a long time, doesn't it? I'm trying to think back to the beginning. So at the beginning, work kind of the two projects I had work-wise just completely stopped at the beginning, which actually now looking back, I think that's a good thing, because I think, you know, when it all started up, obviously there was a lot of stuff to deal with, to sort ourselves out, to get our own heads around it and kind of make sure we were okay. So I think, you know, if you're supporting kind of, you know, more vulnerable people, it's good to have yourself sorted before you go and try and reach out to other people.
Yeah.
I think so. I think now looking back, although it was a shock at first, that was kind of a good thing. But now it's, you know, we're starting to do things, well, we have started to do things online for a month or two. So 3 afternoons a week I'm still working for the Bringing It All Back Home project. So it's mainly kind of group and one-on-one Zoom sessions that we're doing, so that there is some music involved, although I'm sure we'll get onto later the limitations of doing music online together. But we've also been, you know, we've been kind of playing games, so we've been adapting kind of well-known game shows from the 80s and doing those online with people, quizzes, you know, all that kind of thing. And also I think with those sessions at first, we've been talking about this over the last few days, the temptation was just like, oh, to entertain people and make people laugh and uplift people. But actually, over the last couple of weeks, we've remembered how important it was in those in-person sessions just to talk and to ask people how they're feeling, you know, how they're coping, particularly now, you know, with all the additional stuff to deal with. So I think that's been, you know, we've kind of found the balance a little bit more with those sessions, which is good. And I've just had a really exciting week, because on Friday, my friend Sarah and I delivered our first ever online musicultural conversation. So that was part of the Refugee Week celebrations, where there were kind of loads of online things going on. So we've been doing loads of prep for that, you know, lots of kind of test runs and learning of technology, but also going to a lot of kind of online meetings and sessions with other groups that support refugees and asylum seekers, sharing good practice. Been going to a weekly conversation club that Leeds Asylum Support Seekers Network run, which has been great for us, kind of practicing, kind of working with refugees and asylum seekers and running activities in that context as well. So that's been fab. So yeah, just generally learning a lot of new technology. I like that Luna's phrase, getting your inner geek on. So that's great, because I often shy away from technology. I like to just play live and just mess around with instruments, but when it comes to music and technology, I kind of shy away from it. So I've been forced to face up to my fears with that, I think. So it's great. I'm back to the point now where I'm as busy as I was before lockdown. So it's kind of stopped me thinking about all the people and the things that I'm missing, because, you know, when I do that, obviously it's pretty difficult. So that's been really good. And kind of on a personal level, you know, spending more time with loved ones, really. So having a weekly Zoom chat with the other Brays who are all in Newcastle, seeing more of my partner. So, you know, he's self-employed as well. He's like a music tutor and a drum tech and a sound engineer. So we've both been at home a lot, well, all the time, and spending time together. And also we're both quite cat mad, and we've got two very elderly cats, one of whom is very poorly and kind of needs feeding and medicating, you know, on a almost on an hourly basis. So I have to say, if it wasn't for lockdown, you know, I don't think he'd still be with us. So I'm really, you know, you've got to look at the positives, and we're lucky to have our furry ones still with us, and usually either side of me on the sofa, like kind of bookends. So yeah, that's been very nice. So yeah, that's pretty much it, I think.
Yeah. On to a positive note, I wanted to discuss what have been the highs and lows of lockdown. There have been lots of negative aspects to it, being away from our loved ones, not having physical contact, which I think, taking it down to the primal human needs, affects us greatly. But there have been some real positives. As Les said, he's been able to connect with people across the world. I wondered if you guys would like to discuss the positive impacts it's had, and also some terrible lows it's had as well. So start with Les.
Okay, well, I think one very positive thing was I talked a little bit about how we've been trying to bring members of our two quite large bands together and keep them feeling connected and able to be creative. And we put on a virtual concert on it was the weekend of the VE Day bank holiday. It was the 9th of May. It was an evening when our swing band should have been playing at a dance in Berlin, Wharfdale, and obviously that was cancelled. And the other thing that we should have done that was cancelled was a fundraising concert in April. That was planned it was a concert band spring concert, and we were due to raise money for one of the charities that our band support. We were raising money for the Alzheimer's Society, and we had the idea of, could we actually put on a virtual concert that could raise money for the Alzheimer's Society instead? And we did this. We were spurred on a little bit by this thing, the 2.6 challenge to support British charities that are in obviously in huge difficulty at the moment. And we challenged ourselves to get 26 different musicians to record themselves playing or singing a tune for at least 26 seconds, and that we would put those songs, piece of music out as a virtual concert and on YouTube, and try and raise money through that for the Alzheimer's Society. And we managed to do that. And I think I love the phrase "the inner geek." So I harnessed my inner geek. People sent me their videos of themselves that they'd made on their phones, and we got more than 26 band members to record themselves playing. Some people who would never ever never dream of playing solo in a band concert, played on their own in their bedroom or in their sitting room or in their garden. And I managed, using my inner geek, to put all these videos together into a concert that lasted over an hour. And we suggested that people donate, buy a virtual ticket for £5 to watch the concert, and it went live on Saturday the 9th of May, and we earned for the Alzheimer's Society, including gift aid, more than £1,400, which
that's great.
was quite remarkable. It was way more than we could ever have raised at an in-person concert. So that was really interesting, and we had people watching it in the States, watching it in one of the band members is originally Dutch, and she sent it to all her Dutch family, and they all watched it, and my friend in Italy watched it, and my friends in France watched it, and they could never have come to see us play. So that was a huge high. I think at the risk of talking too much, I think that the low was recently where we put out our care home serenading scheme of volunteer musicians. We were getting more and more care homes involved, more and more slots to fill, and we were finding it difficult to fill the slots with the volunteers we had. So we put out some publicity on Facebook and in the local press to try and recruit more volunteers, and we got some quite challenging comments from a small group of people who said they were care home entertainers, who basically accused us of putting them out of work because they said that volunteer schemes like ours were taking the jobs of care home entertainers who should be being employed at the moment by care homes. And I found that I'd never experienced it. I mean, I think many people who use social media regularly experience that kind of thing, sort of attacks on what they're doing quite often, but I'd never experienced anything like that. It was quite unfamiliar for me, and also a bit disappointing, really, when we're using volunteers who are just sort of volunteering out of out of goodwill to try and help people who have been terribly isolated during lockdown. But I think what it's made me realise is how well, I realised already how difficult things were for professional musicians, but it's made me realise how tense and angry many of them are feeling. And that in normal circumstances, I think amateur music and professional music manages to coexist quite happily. Yeah, even in terms of care home entertainment, I think. But now, because people are so tense and in such, I think, personal difficulty, it probably led to this reaction to what is really quite a complex problem. Why care homes are not using professional entertainment. I think that's more complex than that there are schemes like ours operating. But I think that was a low. I've got over it now, and I'm feeling much more confident.
Good, yeah. Luna, I was wondering whether you'd be able to touch on the topic of mental health. You've said that you suffered multiple losses, and I'm sorry to hear you went through that tough time. I was wondering if you'd like to talk about your relationship with music during that time.
Do you mean during the lockdown or during the time of grief? Or?
The time of grief and during lockdown, if you'd like to.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So I was thinking about the highs and lows, and I already, my mind was going in that direction of what's been difficult for me personally, and I think what I've learned is that it's been difficult for people in very different ways, and I can only speak from my own experience, but loneliness can be a challenge, and I am someone who needs I need time alone, but I also need time in community, time with others, and so having no community activity. I live with two flatmates. They're both men, very lovely men, but still, like, the companionship of women was just like seriously lacking for me, and that kind of that crosses over to what was important for me in the time of grief. So in some ways they're very closely related, because for me that it's a time when other distractions recede, and what becomes important is surviving, and that means you're building a base of self-care, and that is about the simple things, like similar to what I was saying before, spending time outdoors, connecting. It's when I really started to connect with wildlife, with birds in particular, just finding pleasure in the simple relationship with nature, and of course music, because for me music has always been the medium to make a space for my feelings. And I think all too often in modern society there's a sense of just covering over the cracks, like, pull yourself together, let's have a good time, let's not think about it, let's watch Netflix, let's go out dancing, let's just stay happy, stay positive. And the thing is, that doesn't really work in my experience. Yes, there's a place for that, and there's a place for optimism and positive thinking, although not in the corporate sense in my view. But I think there's also a need for you have to find a space that the grief needs an outlet. And I found that repeatedly in my life, but particularly in this period that we were talking about, where there was a string of losses one after the other, and I really just felt like, life has cornered me, and I have to just I have to be with that. And actually at that time I did suffer from depression, and I wasn't writing, and I actually, that was hard, because I didn't have music at that point. I couldn't find a connection with it, and I thought that I wouldn't write again, and I thought that I wouldn't play again. And that's when the things like really simple connection with nature, taking care of my body, exercising, meditation, all that stuff, just to feel like human again. But what was interesting was what brought me out of that phase initially was dancing. And I started doing a Brazilian dance called forró, which my friend introduced me to. And then I was back in music, and music was in my body again. But it's very much about connecting the body and the mind. And from that moment, I started to be able to write again, and to write about my experiences. And then, you know, that's when the real kind of catharsis can happen. And it happens gradually over time. But I suppose in my experience, it wasn't necessarily in the moment of grief that I could write. I mean, I was trying to write scraps of poetry and stuff, but it doesn't always happen the way you think, that, you know, you're going through stuff and then you can just sit down and write a song. It can sometimes come after. So I would say, I don't know, if it's helpful to anybody who's kind of going through heavy periods of grief or bereavement and so on, that and wanting to be creative, that it just, there's a sense of surrendering to, first of all, to the feeling, like in a healthy way, trying to make space for that to be what it is, not trying to change it, and then just trusting that eventually, if you take care of yourself, the creativity will come through, and the songs will come from that, because that's definitely what's happened to me. And, you know, throughout my life, music's been the way that I can express those things, and I think it's helped me to stay sane. I don't know what would have happened if I hadn't have found that so early on in my life as well. I started writing music when I was like 8 or 9, and I had a lot of feelings to work with.
Yeah.
So I was lucky that I found it.
Yeah, that's great. Nikki, what would you say? You work with people in a lot of vulnerable situations, but how have you personally felt during this time?
So I think I mentioned before that the first few weeks were kind of hard because everything stopped and our music event stopped and work stopped, and I obviously was dealing with my own emotions, but also just felt, you know, suddenly in a position not to be reaching out and supporting other people who are far more vulnerable, you know, very isolated already. That just felt really horrible. And, you know, I'm sure it was an ego thing, like, oh, I can't help other people. But it really, yeah, that kind of, I found very, very difficult at first. But I think, you know, I mean, I've already talked about work projects and kind of moving those online. But also, I mean, there's a couple of regular kind of music events that I kind of co-run. And also other people asking me to get involved in musical events and projects has really, that's what's kind of really kept my spirits up, I think. But the two regular events that I kind of co-run that we have now moved online, definitely, you know, that those are always such a joy anyway, because we have such a lovely kind of music community that takes part and supports each other and encourages each other. So seeing those kind of how those have worked online has been really good. Are you right if I speak a little bit about the events, because it'd be great to kind of get the word out there as well, or the ones.
Yeah,
the ones
we have 10 minutes left.
I can speak fast.
Okay. Yeah, speak fast.
Yeah, so one of them's called Tower of Song, and that's kind of like I run that with Carl Flattery, who's a lovely friend, a lecturer in songwriting and music production at Leeds Beckett. And that's a monthly night where the audience pick a musical style and a theme, and we all have to write new songs on the theme, and then we come back the month after and we perform them. And we've been doing that kind of for about 7 years, and there's family friendly summer specials and offshoots, and we do one less regularly in Newcastle as well, Tower of Song in the Tune. And the other night it's kind of like the opposite. So that's like a no covers, write new songs night. And Risk Averse that I run with Dan Akers, another lovely friend who's also a tech whiz, that's kind of like a feel good communal sing along night. So we have themes for that as well, and people sign up for a slot, but that has to be a well known song. So they come along and they perform it on the night. And then when it gets to the chorus, the lyrics are projected on the wall and we all sing along with the choruses. And I just remember the first one we did, and I performed first, so nobody else had to kind of take the first slot and be nervous. And I just remember when everyone joined in with the chorus, it was such a joyous feeling. So that's kind of what we're trying to harness. So we've moved both of those online, and yeah, it's just been lovely kind of seeing our regulars and new people coming along, and, you know, people from other countries came along to Tower of Song last month, which was good because it was Eurovision Song Contest style. So that was quite good that we had, you know, people from Bulgaria and France taking part as well. So that's been going really well. But with Risk Averse, the thing that, we haven't touched on yet is the fact that you can't actually sing together online. because of the network latency, the lag. So, you know, when you see on telly all these bands and choirs singing online, somebody's actually glued that all together very cleverly, and it's not really happening. So, so the whole kind of communal sing-along thing is not possible. So we've been getting people to make, you know, pre-record videos and send them in, and then we watch them all together and we kind of compliment people and we enjoy it together. And again, it's meant people have really embraced technology. You know, some people have been making these amazing music videos and subtitling them, and it's just, you know, it's nice because it's encouraged people to find their inner geek, going back to that lovely phrase. And yeah, it's just been really lovely to see how they've worked online and to get kind of new audience from other places, and you know, geographical barriers have been removed. Yeah, so just like to say thanks to everyone who's been coming and supporting the nights, and we will keep doing them and hopefully be back in person before long. And they're all free and friendly, and yeah, do come along and support them. So thank you, little plug there.
That's great. So there are three important things that we haven't touched on just yet, which is the idea of musicians and money during this time, which Les has kind of touched on a bit with his hate comments. Then there are technology advancements and also limitations to technology, and the future of musicians after lockdown. So just starting on money, have any of you been part of the government furlough scheme, or do you know any musicians who have been part of it? So anyone can speak.
Well, I'm really happy that I made the decision to go self-employed and do freelance stuff. But unfortunately, I've fallen through the gap, so I don't qualify for kind of government support because you have to have filled in a tax return for kind of last year. So I'm kind of in the gap. But you know, it's, you know, I'm not spending a lot of money because I'm indoors all the time, and I have been able to do a few hours of paid work. So yeah, I feel really, really fortunate, and I'm glad I'm not one of those people who's got a crazy full-time job that they're doing online while doing childcare. I just think that's, you know, we're talking about having the space to learn technology and do all these lovely things, and there's so many people that are just not in that position, and their lives have become even more stressful and chaotic. And I think, you know, when they hear people talking about how lovely it's been to cook more and do this and that, they're probably feeling a little bit, that's not really how I am. So, you know, yeah, kind of acknowledgement to people in that situation, definitely. Yeah,
Luna and Les, have you been part of any government schemes during this time?
Okay, you go, Les.
Okay, well, I'm very lucky. In my former life, I was a GP, and I've retired, and I'm happily receive my pension just like normal. So I've been, you know, extremely lucky at this time. I think all I'd say.
Sorry to interrupt, Les. We currently have 2 minutes left, so I would love to talk more with you guys about this. You can find all of their social media in the panel feature blog that I've written. And just quickly, where do you see yourselves in 6 months' time? Just quickly.
End with an easy question, Katie.
Playing Christmas carols on the streets of Ilkley in small groups at an appropriate distance from our audience.
I love that.
Yeah, I'll be embracing the future of live music. I see that as potentially we're going to have more interest in lesser known musicians, small groups, small venues, maybe more outdoor gatherings and so on, and live streaming as well. I think I'll continue live streaming because, like everyone said, it opens up this potential of the whole world coming to your gigs and you interacting more with the audience as well. So I think I'm going to be doing more of that and releasing more music.
It's great. It's been so lovely to talk to you all. I'd love to talk more about all of these different topics in much more detail. But your answers have been absolutely fab, and I'm really looking forward to seeing you perform this year at Rural Fest. So thank you very much for coming on here.
Thank you, Katie.
Well,
thank you,
thank
Rural
you very
Fest.
No problem.
Enjoy the day, everyone.
Okay, thank you.